encountering moments with other people where you have hopefully been able to see the power of one moment, one word, one person that you can have, the power that you can have in the life of someone else. So we are going to continue that theme and start talking about you and about how the influence that you can have. So I'm going to go ahead and pray for Dwight Robertson. He's going to be talking with us today. And I'm going to pray, and then he's going to come up. Dear Lord, I just thank you for the beauty that you have put around us that we got to enjoy some of this morning. I thank you for these 27 wonderful people that you have given us to steward, and we are so excited about what they're going to uncover in this coming week, and we're so excited about what's going to happen in their futures and the rest of their lives. And I pray that you would, even now, be awakening them to see how special they are to you, how deeply they are loved, and how much they can do and to advance your kingdom. And pray that you would just bless this time with Dwight and speak to us each individually. Let us awaken to your spirit. In your name I pray. Amen.
I've been standing off at the side looking at your faces, wishing that all of them who are watching could see you. I discovered, so Andrew just turned around and waved. Why don't you turn around and greet them, let them see your lovely faces, get into camera view over here. It's the camera right there. Just, come on, get in their camera space. Get in their space, in their face. Yeah, hey, we're going for it now. We're really glad you're with us. I realized that I'm in a what I would call a kingdom love affair, and I understand. This morning I was reading John. I love this passage, John 17. In fact, if you've got a Bible, just go ahead and turn to John 17. You realize that a week from now, I don't have this same luxury. I don't get to stand on the side of the room and look at your face. A week from now, it just really hit me. I'm going to really miss you because I've been watching pictures that have been coming back from your Wander Week. I've been praying for you. I've been thinking about how are you doing. I've been hearing little reports here and there. I hear and know more than you think I hear and know. And I'm so proud of the fact that you've pushed this far. You've pushed through. This is I had a former student from many years ago say, it's like trying to get a drink at a fire hydrant. There's just so much coming at you. And you have endured. This may be the most intense training experience you will ever be in your life, in terms of all the stuff that God has done and is doing and all the exposures that you have had. I'm looking forward to, I'm just going to hang out through the dinner hour. I want to get in your face this week. I want to be available. I want to hear what's going on in your hearts. But this morning I was thinking about you and thinking about what it felt like for Jesus to know that he was not going to physically be present, sitting at meal tables, sharing space organically on this side of eternity, that they were getting ready to share some last meals together. We would call one of those meals the last what? Supper. That these guys, they've loved what they've been doing in their training program with him, but they didn't realize that everything was radically going to change. And that's what this week is about. This week really is about you preparing for what's ahead, us doing the best that we can to help you in your preparing for what's ahead, and even today for you to begin to get a new vision that's beyond the sight line of this week. This is your final week. And they were stepping into some final experiences. If you've got your Bible open, you can see in chapter 16, he's kind of telling them that there's going to be some joy turned into grief. It's really, I'm smiling now, but some of you, I will see you shed some tears at the end of this week. These are close relationships that you've established, closer than you realize until you get ready to say goodbye and realize, oh my word, we will never have exactly what we have now this side of eternity. And so he's telling them, things are going to change, things are going to get different, and we're going to miss each other. It's not going to be the way it's been. But he's also letting them know, but that's okay because it's not supposed to stay this way. This actually was about the fullness of your plan, his plan, being activated in your heart and in your life. This coming Saturday, when you gather for your graduation, one of the guys who just sent me a note yesterday that he wants to be at your graduation is from India. And he just so believes in what we do. But I remember being with this friend of mine, and I've been to India with him on occasion to do planning training there. And I remember one time, though, when he was here in the States visiting, and somebody asked him, so how did you come to Christ? Like, who got the message of Christ to you? And he said, Thomas. And they said, Thomas who? He said, Thomas. I'm sorry, in America we use last names. Like, what was the guy's last name? Does the dude have a last name? And he said, well, you know, the Thomas. And the person looked at him like, that's ridiculous. If you're talking about who I think you're talking about, you're going back a long way. That can't be who brought you to Christ. But that was exactly the way he saw it, because he had a compounding interest, exponential view of how the message got to him. And I knew, because when I've been in India, people will tell me again and again, particularly if they're from Kerala, because Kerala is where Thomas landed first. And Jesus knew when he looked in their faces, they would not all end up in same geographical regions. They'd spread around some. So this Indian brother of mine said, you know, Thomas came to Kerala, India, and then from there the message kept moving. It eventually got to me, and now I'm committed to get it to Bihar, where it's going to get to people who haven't heard this message yet. And he's in what's a section of India called the graveyard of missionaries, because so many people have been martyred there, and he's been there now for decades, and with knives in his gut and all sorts of things, but standing firm for the gospel of Christ. And he'll be with you for your graduation on Saturday, as will others who are so stoked and excited about your life and your future. Jesus looked into the faces of ordinary people who thought they knew who they were. They thought they were ordinary, like you think of yourself. You don't imagine yourself being as full of the power of kingdom potential as you resonate inside and are full of. There are no perfect people. There are no people who think that, oh, okay, I'm God's plan A for this world. But in fact, you are. And so when he looked at them, he said, things are going to be different. You know, it's not going to be this way. And then he stepped back and he prayed. John 17, this cool prayer. You might look at it and you might see the caption over in your Bible that, you know, Jesus prays to be glorified. Basically, all he's saying in verses 1 through 5 is that, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son may... You granted him authority over all people, that he might give eternal life to all those you've given him. Let me just do a quick review with you. This is really important to me. If you and I are going to follow the model that Jesus sent for us, and you've been doing it, I'm sure, during Wander Week, with our hands, let's just kind of do the little 3-point outline. You know that what Jesus demonstrated again and again, if we're going to make an impact on this world, it's going to first involve, we're going to what? We're going to see, and we will stop, and we will spend time with, which is what he had done with them. They all knew their story. He had seen them, he'd stopped with them, and now he has spent time. More time with them than he has with others, because he's teaching them the plan. He's passing this spiritual multiplication plan on to them, knowing they will pass it to others, like my friend in India. And they will all go to places beyond where they were trained to do amazing things that they didn't have in their sight line as a part of their life plan. But the Father who sent the Son knew the Father was going to send them along with himself. So let's follow along here. He said, so those you've given to me, now this eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. I've brought you glory on earth by finishing the laborship or the work that you gave me to do. We all have something to do, good works prepared in advance for us to do. And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory that I had with you before the world began. I've revealed you, verse 6, to those whom you gave me. For each of you in this room, there will be assignments. For some of you, it's going to be one particular person. You'll sense in your heart that they've been assigned to you. For some of you, it's going to be a territory or region geographically, or it may be an apartment complex or a part of a dormitory that you begin to feel like this is a part of the assignment. Jesus knew he'd been assigned. There'd been territory given to him, people's lives that had been given to him, and he was responsible to pass to them what he had to pass to them. And so he shares that I've revealed you, Father, to those you gave me out of the world. They were yours, gave them to me, and they've obeyed your word. And now they know that everything that you have given me comes from you. For I passed like a baton in a relay race. I passed, I gave them the words you gave me. You've been given things, all of you in this room. You have been given so much. To whom much is given, much is required. And Jesus said, I've passed. I've given them the words you gave me. And they accepted them. It's almost like ensuring that the baton had been received. They've accepted these things. They knew with certainty that I came from you, and they believed that you sent me. And I pray for them. I want you to start noticing all the them words. It's not about you. It's about those beyond you. You and I understand we've been loved to love. We've been given to give. So they knew with certainty that I came from you, and they believe that you sent me, and I pray for them. I'm not praying for the world, but for those that you've given me. The stewardship of relationship. The stewardship of relationship. Those you've given me. Let me pause for a moment in our reading. Let me just do a quick survey with your hands. How many of you have heard of the following three individuals? How many of you have heard of Clenna Slater, or you've heard of Ed Kimball, or you've heard of Chuck Heater? Have any of you heard of these three individuals? Clenna Slater, Chuck Heater, or Ed Kimball? One of you. Have you heard of all three or just one of them? You've heard of two of them. How have you heard of two of them? Okay. Professors. Other than that, I'm seeing almost, it's a majority, it's almost all of you have never heard of those three names. So let me introduce you to an ordinary person who would never have expected that the territory he'd been given would end up exponentially turning into so much. His name was Ed Kimball, and he was a very ordinary guy, very humble guy. You would not have assumed very much of him. In fact, he was not the preacher up front at the church. He did take time to develop relationships with young boys that he was caring for and passing whatever had been passed to him. He taught a Sunday school class at his church, Mount Vernon Congregational Church. Now, there was a boy who came to his community who had actually moved to Boston, Massachusetts, to work for his uncle at a shoe store. And his uncle had one requirement of Dwight. He said, Dwight, if you're going to work in my shoe store, my requirement is that you will go to church every Sunday. Dwight wasn't very excited about that idea, but he wanted to work. He needed the job. And his uncle made it a no holds barred. You will work for me. If you work for me, you will go to church every Sunday. Dwight didn't like going to church. It was boring for him. But there was a guy named Ed Kimball who befriended him, and he liked Ed. Ed was fun, and he cared about Dwight, and he asked Dwight if he would come to a Sunday school class, which Dwight did. Dwight didn't read very good, so every time it came to him to read something, the guys would laugh at him, but Ed had a heart for Dwight, and so he tried to help Dwight read better. Ed and Dwight developed a relationship. And eventually, Ed told Dwight he was going to come visit him at his workplace on a particular day. With my friend Steve Moore, we were running a Kingdom Building Ministry city camp once in Boston many years ago, and I remember us looking up the shoe store to find this place where Ed Kimball came to Dwight's workplace where he worked for his uncle and said, Dwight, you knew why I was coming. I'm asking you today, will you accept Christ in your life as your Savior and as your Lord? Dwight knelt down in the shoe store with Ed Kimball and gave his life to Christ. Nobody would have thought that was a very significant day, but as time had it, Ed came alongside Dwight, helped him grow in his faith, and eventually Dwight moved from Boston to Chicago. And in Chicago, he kept sharing what Ed Kimball had shared with him. Eventually, Dwight started a little institute. His last name was Moody, so he called it Moody Bible Institute. And he began training people who were like him, who didn't think they were special. They weren't really any standout personalities, but he wanted them to get what they ought to be able to get. One of the guys that Dwight Moody shared with was a guy by the name of J.W. Chapman. Chapman came to Christ and was helped to grow in his faith through Dwight Moody, who'd been helped by Ed Kimball. And J.W. Chapman really became stronger and stronger as Dwight not only saw him, stopped with him, but spent time staying alongside J.W. Chapman. Follow this? J.W. Chapman, what Dwight had done with him, what Ed had done with Dwight, he started doing with a professional baseball player named Billy Sunday. And Billy really wanted not only to know Christ, but he wanted other people to know Christ. And J.W. Chapman was really kind of wired the same way. He wanted other people to know about Christ and how awesome he was. So Billy Sunday, who was a professional baseball player, started becoming so passionate about Christ because J.W. Chapman, who saw him, stopped with him, and spent time with him, kept staying alongside him until Billy Sunday was running the race that was marked out for him, not just in baseball interviews, but now he was setting up times that he could talk about Christ in different locations. And the next thing we know, Billy Sunday is speaking about Christ in Charlotte, North Carolina. And God just does something amazing there. And there's some guys in the crowd who begin to really feel burdened that one of the things he's told them is prayer changes things. So they start a prayer group. And these guys start meeting regularly in this prayer group, which Billy Sunday had helped to inspire, who had been helped by J.W. Chapman, who'd been helped by by Dwight Moody, who'd been helped by Ed Kimball. And so Billy Sunday got this prayer group started, and this prayer group continued until finally they prayed, God, would you do something in our city that would affect our state, that would literally affect the nation, and somehow something in our city that would affect the state, that would affect the nation, that would affect the world. The following year, following what Billy Sunday had done, came a guy named Mordecai Ham. And as he shared, a young 16-year-old from the very back walked forward and picked up a baton that had been delivered into his life in his hand. His name was Billy Graham. And Billy has been powerfully used by God around the world to impact hundreds and thousands of lives. 6 U.S. presidents have counseled with him. Billy Graham's legacy is powerful, but many people don't know that if you'd follow the spiritual lineage back from Billy Graham to Mordecai Ham to Billy Sunday to J.W. Chapman to Dwight Moody, you'd find Ed Kimball, an ordinary guy who saw, stopped, and spent time with a 17-year-old boy in his community who needed somebody to come alongside his life, help him make a decision for Christ, and how to grow in that. Ed Kimball. Most people haven't heard of him. But in heaven, I just have a hunch, they all know who he is. An ordinary guy. You don't have to have a platform. You don't need a microphone. You don't need a stage. You don't need a church to lead. Ed Kimball had none of those things. Chuck Heater. Chuck Heater was a football player, an athlete. Phenomenal athlete, really loved the sport of football. I've told you the phrase hearts on fire, lives on purpose. Chuck Heater, he really had the right last name, Heater. His heart was on fire, man. He loved Jesus. In his life, there was just something so steady about Chuck Heater. Well, there'd been a guy who was passionate about football, who had got a football scholarship to go to college, but he had a drinking and a partying problem. And so Bill, who had this drinking and partying problem, actually, his wife says the first night she met him, he was so drunk that Bill got in a borrowed car. He was so drunk, he ran it into a police cruiser. The police cruiser jumped out of the car, arrested the guy who'd hit them. He resisted arrest, so he was arrested, double charges. And the last thing she remembered him saying as he was being put in the police cruiser was, "I love you, Lindy." She'd just met him. He lost his football scholarship, but he won the girl and married Lindy at age 22. Wanted to get his life together, but could never really shake his drinking problem. And in spite of the fact that they got married, within the next 8 years, his goal was to develop an ability as a football coach. And he was assigned to a couple high schools outside of Detroit, Michigan, where he was an incredible coach. Actually took high school teams that didn't have a lot of talent to state championships, and eventually the entire state of Michigan began to know who he was. Within 8 years, he had several state titles. He had 4 kids in 8 years, and the state of Michigan took note of him, and eventually he moved out of the high school ranks into the college ranks. He became an assistant defensive coach for the University of Michigan. Made such a name for himself there, but he still had an enormous drinking problem. So much so it was ruining his marriage, ruining his life, and he was about to lose his job, word had it, when there was a boy named Chuck Heater, who was a football player on the team, who every time Bill said he'd look at Chuck Heater on his football team, he'd wonder, what is it that makes that guy tick? He is so different than all these other players. Finally, one day, when he knew he was really at crisis level in his life, trying to keep it covered over, but he was a mess, he walked over to Chuck Heater, a football player, and said, "Chuck, what is it about you? Why are you always so peaceful? What drives your life?" And Chuck said, "Coach, I could either try to give you an answer now, or actually, if you'd like to come to a meeting tonight, we meet once a week, and it happens to be tonight. A bunch of us who are Christian athletes, we meet on campus, and would you like to come?" That night, Bill McCartney went with Chuck Heater, a football player, to a Christian athlete meeting where he gave his life to Christ. And immediately the next morning got up at the crack of dawn and began reading a Bible. He began fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays. He began being so driven by his passion for Christ, he started discipling his kids. And in fact, his son-in-law said, eventually the thing that you knew about Bill was that what makes him tick is Jesus. And that's why he feels he's on earth, to tell people about Jesus and to have people see Jesus in him. So, how do I know who Bill is? Because as somebody who lives in Denver, Colorado, Bill McCartney was eventually brought to Colorado University as our head football coach. When he came to Boulder, he told the CU Board of Regents, "I'm going to dedicate this football program to the Lordship of Jesus Christ." And they rolled their eyes, but in spite of a team that had little talent and was financially ravaged, began to be so prevalent that his faith caught notice of the American Civil Liberties Union. They forced him to stop organized prayer before team meals and games, but it didn't matter. He was so imprinted with his passion for Christ that it became well known. And as he took the team to one national championship after another national championship, simultaneously, he started something called Promise Keepers, out of his burden that men would begin to know what it means to live and love Jesus Christ. I'd go up to Colorado University and I'd sit in a football stadium with thousands of men. Eventually, the thousands of men would grow so much that we'd have to go to the Broncos Stadium at Mile High, and the tens of thousands would gather there. Eventually, they would gather across in different football stadiums across the nation. And in fact, on a flight just a couple weeks ago, I had a businessman sitting next to me, and he said, "Were you in Washington, D.C. when 1 million men joined together on the mall to love and worship Jesus Christ because Bill McCartney brought us there and led us in an incredible weekend as Promise Keepers to love Jesus with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength?" men across this nation profoundly impacted. That business traveler telling me my life was forever changed. And I wanted to push rewind and go back past Bill McCartney, past Promise Keepers, to a young college student named Chuck Heater, whose heart was on fire and his life was on purpose, who saw, stopped, and spent time with his football coach. What you need to know is spiritual multiplication is a powerful thing. You are in this room today with me because of Glenna Slater, who saw me one day, stopped, and went that hyperactive, too much energy, boy who's always in trouble, needs somebody to help, and came alongside a small child and began to endear me to something that I hated, and won my heart for the kingdom in an environment that I abhorred and eventually I couldn't wait to get to. Because Glenna Slater, and I write about it in the Plan A book, with peanut butter, it was like she just laced the kingdom of God with peanut butter. And the next thing I knew, I could not wait to get to where Glenna Slater had some sort of peanut butter product that she had used to lure me in. Talk about fisher of men. She was a fisher for this boy. And she just lured me in with a food item. She saw me, and while others turned away, she stopped. And she spent enough time to try to figure out what would help this little boy connect with the kingdom. Why do I share those three illustrations? Because I think it's true for you already. In fact, in your outline, and those of you who are online, you've got an outline available to you at the site there, and go ahead and download that. And if you'd fill it in, just in your outline, I want you to fill in. I want you to think about, before we start, write down the names of 3 to 5 people who, without a stage, without a microphone, without a platform, they had the greatest spiritual impact on your life. Do you not have an outline in the room? You're supposed to have an outline in this room for this class called The Value of One. And so just take a piece of paper for now while they're getting the outline ready for you. And need you to just write down, you don't have to write down the last names even, but I want you to think about 3 to 5 names of people who didn't have a stage, they didn't have a microphone, but they had a profound spiritual impact on your life at some level, in some way. And once you've written their name down, beside their name, write down what they did, how they impacted your life. What did they do? I'll give you just a moment to fill this in. 3 to 5 names of people who weren't up front, they were up close to your life. They saw you, they stopped, they spent a little time with you. If you just write down their names and what did they do that caused that impact to occur. Outlines are coming across for you. You can use this outline instead of your paper, and that allows us to keep it all in one place. Everybody got an outline now in the room? Anybody need one? Y'all got one? I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. I'm going to give you permission to even use somebody from mid-May even to now that you would say they took a little time with you and it's left an impact? You know that you had a conversation with someone at some point. Some of you have talked about somebody overseas. Might have been somebody during Wander Week. It could be a fellow team member where you'd say, there was a little extra something that occurred and my life was impacted in a profound way. How many of you have at least 2 names written down already? Hands up, 2 names already? Okay. Some of you still writing. I'll give you just a couple more minutes here. We'll come back to that in a little while. How many of you have names down that are somebody who was either a coach, a teacher, or somebody in a category like that? How many of you have a family member on your list? How many of you it was some sort of an educator? Okay. How many of you it's a category I haven't named? What's the category? Give me a couple categories here.
One was one of the worship leaders at my youth group who took me on individually, and I would just go to his house after school all the time. And he has been the biggest example for me on what it means to just love the Lord with everything. And a lot of who I am is because of him. So.
How many of you would say that by and large, one of the reasons you put people down was extra time? They spent extra time. I want to bring you back to the third part of what we've learned from Jesus. See, stop, and spend time with. Let's just do that together. To spend time with. Had the chance to hear him in the community where I grew up, and I raced to that location where I heard he was going to be, and I actually knew he was going to be coming down a back stairwell, and so I planted myself in that stairwell because I'd hoped for a conversation. I remember the disappointment that flooded me that this guy was not like Jesus. He saw me. He barely stopped, only because I'd asked him to stop, but he was not interested in spending time with. If you really want to impact, you may impress from a distance, but you impact up close. Spending time with is the way that occurs. So in your outline, let's just fill in. Jesus ministered to people. Number one, Jesus ministered to people one life at a time. You see this again and again through the Gospels. It's a very not only attractive thing, he's modeling for you how to impact one life at a time, often through a slow, fill this next blank in, a slow relational process. Now, a relational process can be doing something with someone. Today, I did something with someone that I've been spending time with, who I want to continue to impact the development of this individual. And we did something together today. We got in the car and we went and did something, because a lot of times the way Jesus would spend time with people was doing something together. If you'll follow down in your outline, letter A, in his 3 short years of recorded ministry, Jesus seemed to focus most of it on life encounters and relationships, not in large venue events. He ate, number one, he ate with people around meal tables. A lot of you confess to me you like to eat. You appreciate Lorene. Have you told her lately? I love you, Lorene. She's our cook who does a wonderful job taking care of us. But I just want you to know that he ate with people around meal tables, and you have great ministry potential, because that is a place where you spend time with someone. It's extended time. You get past, hi, how are you? That's why if you can just bust your wallet every now and then and buy somebody, just go get some French fries together and water. It cost you 99 cents at a hamburger joint. But do something that allows you to spend time up close, or just fix some food and share some time together. Some of you are really good at that. Number 2, he talked with them on long journeys. That old adage, more is caught than taught. And, it's that thing where do you get to know people really well? Some of you have really gotten to know each other even at deeper gravitas levels through Wander Week because you did a road. Some of you did a road trip. Some of you, know what somebody's like after you've been up all practically day with them and then half the night. Some of you know more about each other than you wish you knew about each other. You know what? Jesus did that kind of thing with his disciples. And when it says iron sharpens iron, it gets up pretty close. There's a lot of friction when that's sharpening. And sometimes that friction doesn't even feel good. Sometimes that's tough. But there are things that are developing in the midst of all of that. I guarantee you the disciples were angry at Jesus one night, angry at him when he was sleeping in the stern of the boat, when they'd been bailing water and trying to rescue, and he's not into trying to, until he steps into the situation called by them. But I'll tell you, they're probably pretty upset and pretty angry and pretty nervous and everything else. They shared a lot of emotion together. Don't beat yourself up over things you've been through together. There's a lot that happens when you share time together. They did road trips together. We'll call them long journeys. You get to know each other, and a lot is transferred. More is caught than taught. Number 3, he took overnight camping trips with them. Yes, they did camping together. There were no hotels or inns. They weren't doing hotels and inns. They were camping. They were around fires. They were talking late at night, looking at the stars, going out and collecting wood. They were doing camping trips. Number 4, he encouraged them, prayed with them, served with them, and eventually entrusted his eternal cause to them, all in relational ways. Circle the word relational. Relational ways. We have placed so much confidence, you guys, in upfront lecture modalities. But I want you to understand that what Jesus modeled was life-on-life relational transfer. The confidence he had in those guys wasn't how much class time they'd done. It was how much time they'd spent up close together. Number 5, by today's standards, Jesus' ministry could easily look like and be ready for this, a failure. Just trust me. By today's standards, Jesus' ministry could easily look like a failure. Why do I say that? Well, number 6, we might quickly dismiss it because it didn't sustain enough early numerical growth. We are often pulling out calculators in our brains and tabulating. We'll say, how many are you running these days? How many do you have coming to your group? How many? And then we decide whether it's successful or not based on how the numbers add up or don't. So you might dismiss it because it didn't sustain enough early numerical growth. And it didn't end with him sitting on a throne as king of a large earthly empire bearing his name. Number 7, on the contrary, Jesus spent a lot of time hanging out with a relatively small number of disciples. A relatively small number of disciples, teaching them through his words, action, and life. Number 8, but in Jesus' slow relational model, God seemed to be pointing to a different strategy for ministry. He seemed to be saying that the most powerful form of ministry happens in a relational context. Up close or life on life over time. Up close or life on life over time. Life on life or up close over time. Before we press on, I'll just tell you that in the Plan A book, I share a little bit of a story about the day that, actually the day I met this little guy. This is Wilbur. Wilbur's birthday is coming up. His birthday is on July the 15th, and I remember the first day we met in El Salvador, and this is a little guy I love. I have his picture in my Bible, and I pray for, and it was the next morning at breakfast that our Compassion sponsor, who was our translator, who was traveling with us as KBM speakers, pulled up to my breakfast table and said, so how was it when you met your little boy that you're going to sponsor and come alongside? How was that yesterday? And I said, oh man, it was incredible. And I started going on and on and on and on. And she looked at me and said, wow, you already have a vision for this little guy. I said, well, of course I do. She said, well, no, I mean, you're talking about like his future, and you're talking about his life. And I mean, most people just look at, they met them yesterday and they liked them. And I said, well, why wouldn't I think ahead? He's little now, but he's not going to stay little. In fact, I looked at his picture again this morning and I thought, man, you're growing so big. This was a number of years ago, and he's getting taller and taller, and his letters are becoming more sophisticated, and the pictures that he makes, because one of the things he likes is art, so he always makes me a picture that he sends to me, and I've noticed that his pictures are really graduating. They're getting pretty sophisticated. I've come to my wife, who's an art teacher, and said, honey, does he have talent? Like, look how old he is. I mean, he's doing really good. And she said, yeah, he's definitely got talent. I remember I was writing him last week, and I was asking him some questions, and so my translator guides, her name was Rosario. She said, so where did you get this sense of vision for this kid? And I said, well, I don't know. Probably a long time ago when I was really your age, and I'd gone to study Spanish in Honduras, and I got up my first morning, and how many of you went to Honduras? Some of you went to Honduras during this time, and I said I'd gotten up in the morning, and I'd opened my spiritual life notebook, and I got my Bible out, and it was I was up earlier than normal because a rooster had crowed, and it just woke me up, and I couldn't get back to sleep because it was nearby. So I thought, well, I'm just going to get up. It's light enough out, and so I'd opened my Bible, and I'd started, and I heard this rustling because I was having to share a room with these people's kid. Which I wasn't really happy about because I thought I was going to get a private room when I was paying them to be able to have a place to stay in their home so I could go to Conversa, which was a language school I was going to go to for 6 weeks, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. But when I got to the house, they told me they didn't have a private room for me. I'd be sharing a room with their son. So there were 2 single beds in this room, and I get up, and I was kind of turned toward the wall, and I'm doing it, and all of a sudden I hear this kid coming up out of his bed over my shoulder going, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm reading my Bible. Why are you doing that? Well, because it actually helps me get closer to God. Why are you writing in that notebook? Well, because it helps me concentrate and helps me get more out of it. Well, what are you writing in your notebook? And so we just kind of kept on talking, and he said, I have a tablet. Can I do this with you? So he went and got a tablet, and the next thing I knew, every morning, no more private times. Every morning, I'm spending time with this kid, sharing my time with him. What I don't know is just like Jesus said, Father, you assigned me some people, and they're going to end up with some assigned people, that he was an assignment for me. All I knew was he'd interrupted my morning quiet time. Now it was no longer private, and now we were spending time together. That was a lot of years ago. And he was, for many of you in this room who went to Honduras, Eduardo was your host. He was that boy I shared a room with all those years ago who didn't know how to read or study his Bible, and who needed somebody to come alongside him. I didn't know that he would come alongside others. Who would come alongside others? That this summer I would I would end up getting a message on my phone from Chicago that a young boy that Eduardo had come alongside was a part of an evangelistic soccer team that the professional soccer team out of Chicago was sending to Brazil for the World Cup. And I would look at this picture, and here was a boy that had been 18 once that I'd come alongside from my college dorm, who was now the head of this soccer ministry out of Chicago, taking Kike to Brazil, who had been one of the guys Eduardo had come alongside because I'd come alongside Eduardo. So I told this girl that I just said, Rosario, the reason I look at this little boy is that they aren't always little. And they grow up, and God has a plan, and I just want to invest in this little guy as much as I can for whatever God has in store for his life, because somebody invested in me. She cared about me. She laced the kingdom with peanut butter. She came alongside my life, and others came alongside my life as they've come alongside your lives. All of a sudden, Rosario, I'm in El Salvador. Rosario looked across the table and she started crying. I said, what did I say? She said, I think I know who you are. I said, of course you do. You've been with us for days. You've been leading our group through El Salvador from compassion site to compassion site, and we've been having a great time. She said, no, I think I know who you are. How would you know who I am? I never met you before. She said, were you the American that showed up in Honduras 27 years ago? I said, how would you know about that? You live in El Salvador. She said, did you come alongside my cousin named Eduardo Barahona? I said, Eduardo Barahona is your cousin? She said, yes, my mother and I have always wondered why, when his father really wasn't a Christian, how did this boy grow up to love Christ the way he loves Christ? And he told us one day that an American had come into his life and had spent time with him. She said, no wonder you don't look at Wilbur the way other people look at Wilbur. And I tell you, I didn't learn this from any other book than this book. And really, truthfully, a guy named Dawson Trotman who had such an impact on my life, but he died the year I was born in a drowning accident. But he lived this same biblical principle out that Jesus said more time, he really demonstrated more time with less people could ultimately, exponentially impact the kingdom in greater ways. So if you go back to your outline, the cool thing is, I summarize Jesus' ministry model in this way. Fill it in. More time with less. More time with less people equals a greater kingdom impact. More time with less people equals a greater kingdom impact. Really? Look at your hero. Look at your hero. Look what he did. Look how he did it. Mass production logic tells us that public speaking to large crowds and televising programs to as many people as possible is the best way to reach the world for Christ. Number one, these approaches which work on the rules of addition, just adding up numbers, may reach more people in the short run, fill in the blank, short, might reach more people in the short run, but they actually reach fewer people, less people in the long run. And they reach them less effectively than building relationships. Over time, let's keep on going with your outline, life on life, spiritual multiplication is more powerful as a way to reach more people than is mass production as an approach. Over time, life on life, spiritual multiplication is a more powerful way to reach more people than a mass production approach. Now, let's just go down through the left-hand side because I think there's a whole lot of people who would believe if you want your life to make an impact, and many of you told me on day one that you did, many of you would believe that if I could give you the ability to preach Christ to 100,000 people a year, that you'd be pretty sure that your life would have a larger, greater impact over time than most average people could ever imagine they could have. So let's go down the left-hand column, just preaching to 100,000 people a year. It's pretty easy. If you're filling in blanks here in year one, you would have proclaimed Christ to 100,000 people. That's pretty cool. Year two, it's pretty simple, 200,000, right? You'll add another 100,000 because you're adding 100,000. So by the time you get to the end of year 5, you will have shared Christ with 500,000 people. Fill in the blank. 500,000 people or 500,000 people. It's pretty simple. You know how to do this. Add 100,000 every year. So when you get to 10 years, how many people will you have had the opportunity to share Christ with in 10 years? You've preached Christ to how many? End of 10 years, 1 million people, right? Fill it in. 1 million. At the end of 15 years, you keep adding 100,000 every year. Getting pretty excited, man, because some of you got speaking, preaching gifts. That's pretty cool. At the end of 15 years, you will have reached 1.5 million. How many at the end of 20 years? Come on, this is simple addition. The end of 20 years, 2 million. And the end of 25 years, 2.5 million. Make sure you're putting all these numbers in because I want to give you the comparisons. Some of you are so quick at addition. You were done? Okay, so here we go. Now, what if, and let me just do a quick survey. I don't want to put you on the spot, but how many of you feel like in the course of 365 days that are in a year, how many of you feel like you could spend time with a couple people? You could come alongside a couple people in the course of a year. Raise your hand if you feel like you could come alongside a couple people in the course of a year. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about, spending time with a couple people on an annual basis. So at the end of 1 year, there will be 2. That's pretty simple. At the end of 1 year, there will be 2 that you will have come alongside, introduced, helped them grow in Jesus. So at the end of year 1, there will be 2. Now at the end of 2 years, because those 2 have learned from you how to come alongside someone else, and you will challenge them at the end of the year. Why don't you come alongside a couple people? And I'll come alongside a couple people. So at the end of year 2, there will be 6. The end of year 5, there will be 32, because every year you're finding 2 more people that you're going to spend time with. While they're finding 2 people they're going to spend time with, because every single hand went up in the room that you feel like that's doable. Ashley, you feel like you could come alongside a couple people a year. So if you do that and you share with someone else, that's my challenge for you. I have, when I've met with somebody, said, you know, what we're doing together, after when you want to tell them that they're going to do it, is about halfway through when they're going, thank you so much, you're helping me so much. Well, you know, to whom much is given, much is required. I'm just going to ask you, you know, at the end of this year, you're going to do this with somebody else. You won't stop being friends with them, but they're going to be fully able to come alongside a couple people while you come alongside a couple people. So at the end of 5 years, there's 32. Now, if some of you are really good at multiplication, because now we're not doing addition, we're doing multiplication, spiritual multiplication. That's what Jesus was placing his hopes in, compounding interest. That's what credit card companies place their hope in, that you'll open a credit card with them and the interest will compound over time. Business folks understand this. Sadly, hear me, a ton of kingdom people don't understand that that's exactly what Jesus was staking the future of the kingdom on. So we do quick addition instead of multiplication. But let's go to year 10. Year 10, there will be 1,024. 1,024. Now, these 1,024 aren't people who heard how to pray a prayer to receive Christ in their life. These are people who've had somebody spend time with them, helping them, as Jesus said in John 17, Father, I have helped them come to know who you are. They know your word. I mean, they're saturated, Father. They've got it. I know they have it. And that was what he was praying and commissioning them to do And in John 17, he ends up eventually praying for those who will come to believe through them. At the end of 15 years, by the way, it really starts getting pretty cool at this point. At the end of 15 years, there will be 32,768. 32,768. Now, let's keep on going. At the end of 20 years, there will be 1,048,576. So you're just going to put 1,048,576. That is a pretty big number, but some of you, you're pretty quick. Your eyes span to the left and you went, yeah, but if I could preach to 100,000 people every year, I'm still ahead. So let's just push it out 5 more years. If you could preach to 100,000 people who heard a presentation once when you preached, as opposed to come alongside. If you come alongside 2 people every year and you help them do the same, at the end of 25 years, there will be, are you ready for the number? 33 million. 33, 554, 432. 33,554,432. Why did I do something like that? Because I want you to know, yeah, there will be some attrition. Jesus had attrition. He had Judas who didn't follow through. But do you know what? My Indian friend who will be here for your graduation would say, but there's a whole bunch of people who do follow through. There's a whole bunch of people who do follow through. And the message keeps on exponentially in a multiplied sense going farther. If you go back to your outline, number 3, life on life ministry is also a strategy to impact people in a deeper way. In other words, it's both deep and wide. Life on life ministry is also a strategy for impacting people in a deeper way. In other words, it's both deep and wide. The people who spend time with other people, those people get it deeper. It's not just that the numbers go wider over time, but the impact of the gospel and how it looks to somebody like Bill McCartney who looks at the football player Chuck Heater and goes, how do you have so much peace? What is it about you? When it goes deeper because you've spent more time, the impact goes wider. Letter A, your influence has to be more than passing on information to another person. It's not about you being an information broker that just downloads information to another human. Letter B, one of the clear hallmarks of Jesus' ministry was that it was highly relational. He passed on like baton passing, passed on the values of the kingdom to his disciples in a relational way where they were both taught and caught. Let's read this verse together out loud. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And the things that you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others. See, life on life relational ministry allows you to tailor fit your approach to each person. The people I've had the privilege of coming alongside are people that when you are spending time with them, you can talk about, cover, slow down on the topics that mean a lot to them, the things that they're confused about. I mean, think about the man from India who's going to come to your graduation. If it hadn't been for Jesus slowing down and tailor-fitting something to Thomas, what was it Jesus tailor-fit to Thomas? Anybody remember? What was it, Mike?
He had to have him put his fingers in his skin, his skin in his side.
No one else had that tailor-fit moment. But Jesus came back to spend a little extra time with Thomas to make sure Thomas was going to get this thing that he hadn't gotten. So Jesus stayed alongside. How big a deal? Ask all the people in India how big a deal that was, and they'll tell you. The gospel got to us because Jesus made sure Thomas had the baton securely in his hand. And for Thomas, who really was a questioner, he had to really experience everything on his own. He had to get his hands into all those spots and know that he knew that he knew. And Jesus understood that, and he didn't go, well, forget that guy. No, he could tailor fit it. For some of us, the breakdown in gospel transfer has been because there has not been more time spent with those who needed that additional time spent with them to process and think, or they get to a problematic moment and they need somebody to help them get through it. Jesus helped Thomas get through it. This life-on-life model for ministry is the way Jesus taught us to pass the spiritual wealth he's given us into the lives of others. When they begin to bring things up to you, what you want to begin to do is think about what's been passed to me that might be helpful to them going forward. Some of you will actually you'll go back to your notebook because somebody asked you a question. You said, that is a really good question. I think we covered that somewhere. And you'll go back to your notebook at some point and you'll get together with them and go, hey, I got something for you. I actually made it. Now listen, you got total permission. I made a photocopy for you because they would want you to have this because they totally told me I was supposed to pass this to other people. So here, you asked me that question last week. I got something to help you with. Somebody else is going to say, what about such and such? And some of you are going to go, oh, I went through the experience with somebody who'd be perfect for you to talk to about that because they know exactly what that's like. Let me put you in touch with. And suddenly you're somehow brokering a relationship between this person who's in your life with someone else. Last week, I got a note from somebody on Facebook, and my mind raced all the way back to a young guy that I had spent time with who I knew was going to a particular university where I'd met another guy in a different state, and he said he was going, and I said, you two should know each other because you have some things in common. Well, how would we get to know each other? Well, I'll help that connection happen. Some of you, you'll introduce somebody to somebody else. Do you remember anybody? What are the places? What are the things that God has, by His grace, passed to me that I could propel into the lives and tailor fit or pass to others? As I read in the Gospels about Jesus' interaction with the disciples, letter A, it reminds me of watching a relay race at a track meet where Jesus spent a lot of time intentionally passing the baton. Just fill in passing the baton. How many of you have ever run relays with batons involved? Anybody run a relay with a baton involved? Lauren, I'm gonna pick on you. How big a deal? Did you guys ever practice passing batons? What? All the time. What? Why'd you do that all the time? I thought it was just about running.
So we wouldn't drop them in the races.
So you wouldn't drop them. It could be dropped. What happens if it gets dropped?
You could get disqualified.
No, so it's all over, huh? You just disqualified. Have any of you ever seen races where that was the significant loss issue? The baton did not get successfully passed? What's the secret to a baton pass? What's critical? How do you make a successful baton pass? What's required to make it successful?
It's all about timing and the handoff.
Timing and the handoff. So some of you who also have done stuff with batons, take me a little further. Explain that to me as though I don't know anything about this. What timing? Is she doing so well you don't want to help her?
It's just like being in sync with one another. You have to know your teammate.
Whoa. Like you're so with them? You're running, literally, you're running with them. You're running with them, timed in such a way that your cadence of the way you're running everything, it's side by side because you're trying to successfully make sure that they're not only starting, but they have this enough to continue. They have it. So you're running up toward them. then you're running really literally with them until they've secured it and they're running the race marked out for them. So it has everything to do with your being with them successfully, ensuring, as Jesus was with Thomas, they've got it, they've got it. Which is what, turn to John 17 again. You've still got it open? Look at John 17 here. When Jesus is declaring that in verse 8, for I gave them the words, it's like a baton pass. I gave them the words you gave me, and they accepted them. They've got them. They've got it. Now I'm praying for them. By the time you get to verse 20, he starts praying too for people they're going to come alongside and do a baton pass to. My prayer is not for them alone, these guys I've passed to, but now I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father. Just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we're one, I and them, you and me. Get down to verse 26. I have made you known to them, and I'll continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. Eventually not just with, but in. The cool thing was Jesus modeled this sort of understanding that his hope was not only in those that he had baton passed, but his hope was for the next generation, and he had already begun in John 17 to pray for those who were going to receive what he'd passed to these disciples into their lives. So, number 2 in your outline, the baton exchanges are the most critical part of the relay race. The baton exchanges. That's why I've got a little booklet that Stacy is going to be providing for you today out of our resource center. And it's just simply called Baton Passing Relationships. It's available at our store on our website, but you get this for free. You get lots of stuff for free throughout the summer. And this is just to kind of help you with these baton exchanges. It's kind of in a Q&A format to assist you in the relationships, because I don't want to just be committed to you. Do you have it? Do you got it? I want to be committed to your successful baton passes to other people. So this is something you can kind of just come back and refer to. It's just a small little booklet. You can keep it as kind of Bible size, kind of keep it there. Am I doing this in my relationship? How's this going? Am I addressing the hard issues? Am I adopting them for a lifetime? Am I helping to prepare them for what's ahead? Kind of just gives you a little checklist of how am I doing this baton pass to them in the exchange. Letter B. The same is true for kingdom laborers. The values of God's kingdom are passed like a baton from one generation on to another, from one generation on to another. It was so fun for me at Deep Camp to be able to continue to keep my eye on a young man who, had it not been for a peer who was my age, who I came alongside with passing to him what had been passed to me into his life when we were just fellow students. But this guy named Jerry came to love Christ, and eventually when Jerry was smitten with cancer to the point that it was going to take his life, Jerry came on one last visit to Colorado to see me and to see my family with his wife. He nicknamed my son Racin' Drayson, and we had such a great time. And one of the things he wanted to do when he was here in this building was go into the prayer room and have some time in there. Before he left my house, where you'll be tomorrow night with me and my family, before he left my house the final time, he said, Dwight, I left something in the prayer room at Kingdom Building Ministries. I really hope that God will somehow extend my baton passes beyond my lifespan. because I'm running out of time. Within 3 months, that's been many years ago, my friend passed away. But in our prayer room here is a small little cross with the prayer of Jabez. Jerry had prayed that God would enlarge his territory. So when scholarship funds came in my friend Jerry's name this summer again, as they've been coming summer after summer, my son, Drayson, had a boy at school that he's been coming alongside, baton passing to. And we were sitting in our family room, and Drayson said, "Dad, I just think this is a year that my friend at school needs deep camp." I hope I can get through this. I said, "Really? Well, that's amazing, because today a full scholarship came for deep camp. Can my friend have it?" "Absolutely. He's perfect for this." He's gone through some brokenness in his family structure. His family completely came apart, and that's what my friend had gone through when I came alongside him all those years ago as just a fellow student who I was baton passing through to, whose life had been ravaged by divorce and a family breakup, and he didn't know where to turn, and I became that friend that when Jesus says, you know, a friend sticks closer than a brother, I became like a brother to this friend of mine. He actually came and spent time in our home, and we shared a lot of life together, but most importantly, we shared what living and loving Christ was all about. So on Thursday night of deep camp, I was in the back of the room, and when I saw this friend of my son's step out from his seat and go forward, and I saw my son get out of his seat and go up and kneel beside him, I got pretty excited. I thought back to my friend Jerry's prayer, "Lord, would you somehow enlarge my territory beyond my lifespan?" That following Saturday night after deep camp, as you were heading into Wander Week, a week ago Saturday, my son had said, "I don't think he's really ready to return home. Can I take him there, get a fresh change of clothes? Can he come back to our house just for 24 hours and spend time with us and go to Saturday night church with us and where we go?" And so we went to Wendy's afterward. I've had some pretty significant spiritual conversations at Wendy's for some reason in my life. And so we're sitting at Wendy's, and I said to this guy, so what was your highlight from deep camp? He said, "Oh, hands down, it was Thursday night." I said, "Well, tell me about it." He said, "Well, Thursday night, you know, when they talked about whatever you've inherited in your family biological legacy line doesn't have to be your future. You can drive a stake down that your future and your legacy can be different. I just felt so much hope in my heart." And he said, "I was sitting near Drayson, and your son just kind of reached out and put his hand on me, and the minute he did, I just started crying uncontrollably. And I just went and knelt, and my first feeling was, here I am, alone, and then your son was right beside me, spending time with me praying." What my son has been doing for 2 years with him, doing once again, and for that 24-hour period after, and then helping prepare him for re-entry at home, to be able to share with his sweet mom, this brokenness, I just want you to know it's not going to extend to your grandchildren. There will be something new and different ahead. I thought about my friend Jerry. I thought about our relationship a long time ago, and I thought about how cool is that my son and I didn't set this up. We're co-laborers together. Some of you will have unique co-laborship experiences with other people. You're going to have some unique opportunities that suddenly you're just going to go, how did God do that? How did that happen? That's weird. I remember when I opened my phone this summer and went, how did Rick and Kike get on the same soccer team going to the World Cup? How in the world did God do that? I think God just has fun every now and then, just kind of surprising and shocking. I just know today, before I stood in front of you and I stood over here beside you, I began praying for Marcus. And then Marcus spent time with me. And that's why I have the deep relationship with God that I have. I look forward to meeting your sons and daughters in the faith. I look forward to running into your lineage, your spiritual lineage. Don't worry about crowds of people and fast addition. Worry about territorially, who is God allowing you to see that you could stop and spend time with? Who is she? Who is he? Where are they? And I'm going to tell you, they may be young, small. They may be same age. They may be older. Carlos was older. Carlos was in his 50s when I was in my 30s. And he was embarrassed to take me out to a Mexican restaurant for lunch and say, I've been watching you, and whatever you got passed to your life, I never got. As a migrant worker growing up, I never got what you got. And you're a white guy, and it intimidates me to tell you that you have what I want, but would you come alongside my life? Because God's giving me people to come alongside, and nobody's come alongside me. And I said, Carlos, dude, I'm so sorry. I never even thought about, I didn't say you're so much older, but I said, you're a little older than I am. He's almost like 20 years older than I was. But spiritually, I guess I was older than he was. In his head and in his mind, things had been passed to me that hadn't been passed to him. And I had an opportunity to pass to him. They're going to be all ages, all shapes, all sizes. Same gender to same gender is the best way to do it. That's what Jesus modeled, and older women to younger women. But older can mean simply spiritually, not necessarily age chronically. So don't worry about that. And yeah, let me pray for you, Lord. When I look at your book and I see, first in the Old Testament, guys coming alongside other guys, gals, Lord, I see these amazing relationships. I think of even Mary when she went to visit Elizabeth, and she probably would have written Elizabeth on her list like we were writing names earlier. When Elizabeth just so celebrated with Mary what was happening in her life and came alongside her for a season that was a real launch season for Mary as the mother, earthly mother of our Lord. I look at Moses with Joshua, who not only came alongside and spent time with him, but even climbed up a mountain while Joshua was out in the battle and prayed with Aaron and Hur. I think of Paul, who wrote to Timothy in his first letter, to my true son in the faith, but in the second letter he said to my true son, because some of these relationships that they're going to have are going to feel like family. They're going to feel things in their gut, in their heart, that feel like family. And some days that person's going to say, you mean more to me than just a friend. I'm in this room with people who are going to allow you, God, who've poured into them, to baton pass, pour out, pass to others what you've entrusted to them, that those others might in turn entrust to others. Who knows, Lord, what you've set up with those who are in this room, what you have planned and purposed. And I pray for the power of your Holy Spirit to come upon them. They would be witnesses to who you are, what you've done, and they'd be successful passers of the batons that are going to equip the race running that has been marked out for those that you're going to enable them to see and stop and spend time with. I pray encouragement would come to them this week as they begin to think about what's ahead. And you'd already begin to inspire them with maybe even some thoughts about who one of those individuals might be when they return where they're headed next. Or who somebody is that's a carryover from this summer they've already begun a relationship with. They were their deep camp counselor. And that's supposed to continue. They're supposed to continue to spend time with, but it's going to be through Facebook or Skype. But for that person, they are that mother or father in the faith that's going to help them continue to press on. So Lord, thank you for what you have purposed and planned for each person in this room to be a part of and do. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to ask you to do something right now real quick. Some of you are really good at math. There are how many of you in this room? How many? Okay. So I want you to take 27 and multiply it by 2. What do you have? Okay. I've got mathematicians who are at odds with each other, and somebody's pulling out a calculator. 54? You get 54? Okay, but if each of you are taking on 2, is that the number you come up with at the end of a year? 54? Or if you're taking on 2, does it become slightly higher than that? Is it 54? Yeah. So 27. You can come to my house for the reunion. Yeah. I want you guys to know that all I've done today is share with you what has been the joy of my life. I have never considered myself to be a highly qualified speaker. I've never considered myself to be the world's greatest leader. But years ago, I began to believe in Jesus' plan of spiritual multiplication. How many of you read the Master Plan of Evangelism? I read that book at age 18. And it shifted my understanding of how I wanted to invest my time going forward. Whatever your vocation is, you can do this. Whatever your vocation, you can do this. And as you well know, there need to be laborers in a lot more spheres and facets of society than there currently are. So you and I, if we do this in our diverse vocational fields and our geographical regions, think of what God could get done in short order over time. It's pretty powerful. Stacy will be giving you the gift of the small little booklet called Baton Passing Relationships. Any questions you have for me or comments before we wrap up this teaching time earlier than we were supposed to? This was supposed to be a 2-hour class. We got it done in an hour and a half, which is a good thing. So how's that? Yes, Andrew.
Earlier you mentioned Jesus only chose a select few. What was the common number of disciples that the rabbis or teachers would have chosen if they were disciples or taught?
I don't know the answer to that in terms of, because it was my understanding that when a rabbi could select a varied, I don't think there was anything magical about certain numbers. It's my understanding there wouldn't be. You could have 2, you could have 20. I don't know why 12. I just know when I challenged you to 2, 12 looks like a lot. And what I've learned, like when I've done relationships, like if I have 2 that I'm even with at the same time, they'll be more vulnerable than if I have 12. Then I've always got people who aren't going to share everything front and center and forward. In fact, I've really felt like one-on-one is really optimal because they'll go deeper, darker, tougher places than we can go when there's an audience that's taking in their information. But I also noticed that Jesus broke his 12 down into 3, sometimes 2, sometimes 1. And so, I think he had higher hopes with Peter because honestly, he'd spent more time with Peter. So when he turned to Peter, I don't know that it was that Peter had tons more potential. Some of them were I think, smarter, actually. But Peter had more time with, and more is transferred. The reason I think John might have been smarter is because when Jesus was on the shoreline in John 21, John was the first one to figure out who it was on the shore. Peter was not the first guy to figure out that was Jesus on the shore. But Peter was the first one to jump out of the boat, so that was a good thing. Any other questions or comments?
In 4 years, what would the number be?
No, that's your homework assignment. That's your homework assignment. In 4 years, figure it out. But have a little fun with that. Have a little fun with that. I'll tell you what I did. Andrea, what I did when I was 18 years old, after I finished reading the master plan of evangelism, I sat in my car. I could take you to the exact street, the exact place where I sat in my car. I got out a calculator, and I figured up just with my life. How many of you plan on, if Jesus tarries, how many of you plan on living 20 years? So, I just sat there with a calculator, and I took my own life forward 20 years. And that was a convincing day for me that I didn't want to exchange my life for stages. I wanted to invest my life purposefully in what I knew would last, the way my master taught me. And do I speak on stages? Yes. Do I teach and preach? Yes. But my greatest hope is that his master plan will be findable in my own life. Any other questions or comments? Good. All right. End of class.